In today's video, we're going to be looking at creatures of legend that turned out to be 100% real, at least in a different point of view. Kind of like this small marsupial that looks like an amalgamation of different animal body parts and what people initially thought to be a tribe of headless men. But first, let's find out the origins of this beautiful creature that sent a million little girls' hearts aflutter. Unicorns. Pure white or silvery horses with long flowing manes, a spiral horn on their heads, and also poop out rainbows. No wonder little girls and quite a few adult men as well love unicorns. These creatures are the stuff of legend and are often associated with magic and have been described for most of history throughout many world cultures. They were once thought to be real creatures and not mythical at all, especially in ancient times. Even notable Greek philosopher Pliny the Younger wrote about them, among others. And believe it or not, it might have also made its way into the Christian Bible as a description of the creature called a riem, which sounds suspiciously close to that of a unicorn. We now know that there were no actual unicorns that had ever existed, but they were all myth and legends. But given that, the unicorn's origin story is grounded in reality, albeit a bit tenuously. Pliny the Elder is the most likely source of the unicorn's appearance in Europe with his description of the rhinoceros. He wrote in the 1st century CE that it, and I quote, has the head of a stag, the feet of an elephant, and the tail of a boar. It has a single black hole which projects from the middle of its forehead. It may not fit the modern description of a unicorn, but hey, these are ancient times we're talking about. Really, it's not as if one could just whip out a phone and take a picture. To further add fuel to the legend, Vikings would regularly take narwhal tusks to Europe and sell them to people as unicorn horns. Given that they'd never seen a narwhal or a unicorn, the explanation worked, and people traded in so-called unicorn horns for centuries. The Kraken. The Kraken is a creature mired in legend and given to us in popular media. At least the Kraken is a very common phrase used in a lot of different movies and also cartoon shows for parody effect. The Kraken is a massive and mighty creature from deep beneath the sea that pulls ships down to the depths with its mighty tentacles. Stories involving the Kraken can be found throughout European literature, and it's often described as a massive creature that resembled a floating island or was so large that its tentacles could pull entire vessels under the sea itself. Sailors have been describing strange creatures for literally thousands of years, and while the descriptions range from plausible all the way to wildly improbable, some descriptions have proven to be highly accurate in the past couple of decades. Of course, no tentacled creature is large enough, nor strong enough to capsize entire ships, but what these sailors were describing was most likely the colossal squid. The largest of the cephalopods can reach lengths of up to 33 feet and weigh in at 1,500 pounds. They have strong tentacles, which are filled with suction cups like other squid and octopi. However, these nasty buggers featured large hooked claws, giving it a grabbing advantage over others of its kind. The first live specimen wasn't captured until 2007, but tales of the beast's mighty tentacles is what probably gave birth to the myth of the Kraken, as they've washed up on beaches around the world throughout history. The Blemier. The Histories, a book written by ancient Greek historian and geographer Herodotus, contains a few very fantastical tales. One of these tales entails a group of wild men from Asia and Africa called the Blemier. Tales of these strange creatures were brought to Europe by sailors who ventured into Asia and Africa and are described in the book as headless men, covered with hair and headless which left their facial features on their chest. Europeans were fascinated with the tales of these headless men, and honestly, who wouldn't be? Thus the legend of the Blemier spread like wildfire across ancient Europe. Pliny, or Pliny at this point, constant purveyor of fantastical tales, wrote about them of course, as well as noted statesman and writer Sir Walter Raleigh. They were also mentioned in Shakespeare's Othello. Now, we can never be exactly sure who these sailors saw, but there are two possible sources of this legend. The first, and probably the most likely, are highly inaccurate descriptions of gorillas. Nowadays, gorillas are commonplace and can be found in most zoos around the world, but they weren't officially described in scientific journals until the mid-1800s. With men's penchant for exaggerating descriptions of what they saw, it's very likely that these large primates somehow morphed into headless men as the tale was spread from ear to ear. Another possible explanation is that those ancient sailors were describing African tribesmen. Some of these tribes have the habit of lowering their heads while they walked, which would probably lead some people into describing them as headless, at least when viewed from a distance. But what I think likely happened is that these two separate descriptions of gorillas and tribesmen somehow got mixed up and morphed into tales of the Blemier that we know today. The Griffin. Like many of the mythological creatures on today's list, the Griffin is an amalgamation of different body parts from different animals. It combines the body, tail, and hind legs of a lion with the wings, forelegs, and head and that of an eagle, resulting into quite the fantastic beast indeed. They themselves have been around since classic antiquity, and they were often depicted as honorable guardians of important artifacts and treasure. As its myth grew throughout the medieval period, it somehow became a Christian symbol of divine power, and was also considered to be the guardian of the divine, but the Griffin's influence doesn't end there. Griffins can be found throughout Europe, North Africa, and Asia, with the earliest examples being found in the Egyptian city of Hyrcanopolis, which were dated to between 3300 and 3100 BCE. The Griffin's origin most likely came from misidentified fossil finds. According to Adrian Mayer of Stanford University, Scythian nomads of Central Asia may have discovered fossils of Protoceratops. As a dinosaur enthusiast like me might already know, they have a large prominent beak. This in turn may have led them to believe what lay before them were the remains of a large, ancient flying beast. Having nothing of the knowledge that we have today, it's highly possible that these ancient nomads truly thought that the fossils were from a flying creature unlike anything they had seen before. And in the way they usually try and explain the world around them, came up with the legend of the Griffin. To be fair, it probably wasn't exactly what they expected now that Griffin is ingrained in various cultures around the world. Dragons. Aside from unicorns, dragons are also arguably one of the top mythical creatures that have invaded our collective imaginations. Really, it is the most pervasive, having been depicted in many mythologies in various ways throughout Europe, Asia, and Africa, with some of the earliest examples including the Mujushu from the ancient Mesopotamia, Apep in ancient Egyptian mythology, and the dragon from Beowulf. The amazing thing is, descriptions of dragons across multiple cultures are oddly similar. In nearly every depiction, a dragon is a large serpentine creature with 4 legs and 2 wings. Almost all dragons can fly, even the wingless Chinese dragons who are said to be able to produce and walk on clouds. Of course, many of them can also breathe fire. Over the centuries, dragons created for fiction have included variations on color and ability, including the ability to breathe frost, survive in lava, and just about anything else people could imagine. And believe me, people can imagine quite a lot of insane things. There's gotta be a basis behind all these dragon-based mythologies. The thing is though, there isn't a scholarly consensus regarding how different cultures all across the globe came up with the dragons. The most prevalent among them, at the same time the most plausible, are theories that suggest that ancient people found dinosaur fossils and, as with the Griffins, told tales of gigantic flying reptiles to explain the existence of them. Of course though, dragons might have been inspired by a different animal altogether, one that is not extinct like the dinosaurs. These ancient people may have also found skeletons of other large reptiles, such as the Komodo dragon, iguanas, alligators, and Gila monsters, and thought them to be dragons. In fact, they may have even seen a live one and, as one would, exaggerated their descriptions, thus giving rise to a legendary animal. The direwolf. If it weren't for Game of Thrones, I don't think I'd know much about direwolves, but those of you who like playing games like Dungeons & Dragons already know about them. Direwolves have been depicted as gigantic wolves capable of easily taking down a large man. They're often described as vicious and efficient killers, and if you're not a Stark, they're also thought to be notoriously hard to train. These descriptions, though, aren't based on myths and story about them. The real direwolf, and yes, there were real ones, were quite different. Direwolves went extinct around 9,500 years ago, right at the end of the last Great Ice Age. They were big animals, but they weren't as gigantic as they are depicted in legends. In fact, most specimens that have been studied show the direwolf to be about the same size as modern gray wolves. They weighed around 132 pounds and were very capable predators thanks to their teeth, which were larger and much better at shearing flesh compared to those of their modern-day cousins. They also had the strongest bite force of any of the canine species, which was deduced based on the size and shape of their skulls and jaws. It's these jaws that made it possible for them to prey on a variety of large Ice Age animals, such as horses, camels, mastodon, bison, and probably even Ice Age humans. And although difficult, humans must have found a way to train them as well. Fact is, a lot of canine species today, both wild and domesticated, trace their roots back to the direwolf. It's more likely the tales of their ferocity gave life to the mythological abilities of the animal, which persist to this very day. The Roc. Coming from Middle Eastern mythology, the roc was said to be one enormous bird of prey. If you need something to give you an idea of its proportions, look at this depiction by artist Charles Maurice Detmold of a roc flying off with a fully grown elephant. Also, that's not a one-off. There's many ancient descriptions of these giant birds doing pretty much the same thing. This giant bird was popularized in various fairy tales and folklore from the region, and there's a rock in 1001 Nights as well as many other popular stories. The rock's description varies from story to story, but in most of them it's a gigantic eagle. This mythological creature represents a fear of being picked up and carried off without any means of defending oneself, which has its roots in numerous Paleolithic cultures. Even famed explorer Marco Polo himself alluded to the animal. He described the rock back in the 13th century as an eagle of enormous size, strong enough to fly off and feast on elephants. Clearly, Detmold's painting was based off of Polo's description. There's also no fossil records that would point to the existence of the rock in prehistory, but its legend may have come from other sources, such as Madagascar's elephant bird, a large flightless bird said to be twice as tall as an ostrich. Also, you have sailors bringing in stories of large eagles capable of flying off newborn lambs that can also be a possible source for this legend. Whatever the source is, there's no denying the fact that the rock is one of the most intimidating and awe-inspiring mythical creatures of legend today. Now it's time for today's best pick. Today's pick is a bit different from the rest, in a way that we aren't sure what it is exactly. The Ningen. The vast realm of the ocean is so unexplored that it almost makes sense that some rumored, but yet unseen, creatures may call this strange blue world home. One of these rumored creatures to exist in the great depths of the ocean is the Ningen. The being is huge, dark white, or pitch black, depending on who's describing it, and vaguely humanoid. The legendary creature was allegedly first spotted by a group of Japanese fishermen who were in the Arctic around 2007. Since then, there's only been sporadic sightings, mostly in the frigid waters around Antarctica, but is becoming more and more well known. Aside from having a humanoid shape, descriptions of the creature varies. There are tales of the Ningen being up to 30 meters long, while others say that it's a bit smaller. As mentioned earlier, some say they're white and others say they're black. What the descriptions do agree on, however, is that it has a human-shaped head as well as a short and thick neck. The Ningen also seems to have shoulders and two large, long, and perhaps unjointed arms. The arms typically end in long fins that are reminiscent of hands, and some reports go as far as to say they have fingers on those hands. These are the main humanoid features, as it appears its torso and the rest of its body ends in a tapering body ending in a fin. Needless to say, there's no other creature in the water nor land that fits the Ningen's description. Yet what could it actually be? A yet-to-be undescribed sea creature, or is it just another case of sailors exaggerating descriptions of known animals to unbelievable proportions? Looks like we need to catch one to find out. Moby Dick. Although not a myth in the traditional sense, Moby Dick is certainly one of the most famous mythical animals around. For those of you not in the know, Moby Dick is the titular white whale of a book written by Herman Melville. The story of this vindictive and vengeful whale who became Captain Ahab's bane has permeated the modern zeitgeist as the target of one's obsession, which is mythical in its own right. Chances are you already know the story, or at least the gist of it. What you probably don't know is that something eerily similar to that whale did exist, and his story is also quite close to that of the fictional book. In 1920, real-life Ahab, Captain George Pollard Jr., was in command of the ship Essex when it was sunk by a whale. He survived the ordeal and returned to Nantucket, where he was given another ship, the Two Brothers, to captain. But after 2 years, he crashed on a coral reef, and it was then when he deemed himself unlucky at sea and promptly retired. But we're not here to talk about his quiet retirement. Let's go back a couple of years and find out what happened to the Essex. What sank the ship was an 85-foot albino sperm whale, which directly attacked and smashed into the ship. The whale returned to attack the vessel at greater speeds, and the Essex began taking on water, leaving the men to flee. And with that almighty thud and subsequent capsizing of the Essex, the legend of Moby Dick was born. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it, it really works. The Duckbill Platypus. We all know about the weird creature known as the Duckbill Platypus, but just a few centuries ago, no one really knew of its existence. The animal was first described by Captain John Hunter, who encountered the animal when he was sent to Australia. Of course, when he told of his find to people back in Europe, he was met with curious disbelief and even a few raised eyebrows. Hunter eventually sent a platypus pelt and a sketch of the animal to Britain, which was a common thing for sailors and naturalists to do when they found a new species. But even then, naturalists from Britain didn't believe the animal could possibly exist, and as a result, a myth grew surrounding a very real animal. Honestly, I don't really blame them. The entire animal does look like it was worked on by the world's best taxidermist. It's got a duck's bill and webbed feet and a beaver's tail and body. It lays eggs and takes care of it in a pouch, and it's the only one of 2 mammals to carry venom. Even when it was officially described by naturalist George Shaw in 1799, many still doubted it was real. Shaw himself was sure it was all a hoax when he first saw the carcass he'd been sent. Aboriginal legends say that the platypus was the result when a female duck mated with a water rat. Despite how literally impossible that pairing is, it doesn't compare to the fact that for years the world thought that the platypus was the work of someone's nimble fingers, only out for a quick buck. See you all next time!